You are listening to the Justice in Heels podcast with me, your host, Danielle. Join me as I discuss interesting legal topics with inspiring female legal professionals who paved the way for the rest of us. Welcome to another episode of the Justice in Heels podcast. Today, I am joined by Nicolene Schoeman-Louw from SchoemanLaw Inc. Nicolene, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. So can you tell us a bit more about yourself? Who is Nicolene in a nutshell?
Thank you so much. Where do we start? So my name is Nicolene. I have been practicing as an attorney of the High Court of South Africa, also a Notary Public, and I'm a mediator and a conveyancer. And I am an internationally accredited legal project practitioner, quite a mouthful. I've been practicing as all of these things for give or take 16 years this year. So I'm giving my age away in a way. But so going to the question as to who I am, I keep myself busy. My day job is being an attorney. I would also like to say that I'm a passionate entrepreneur. I've got a keen appreciation for the entrepreneurial spirit, and I think I'm part of that. And last but not least, I'm also a mom and a wife. So wear many hats on any given day. But I think a legal entrepreneur is an apt description of who I am. And then maybe in addition to that, someone who likes to empower others through knowledge and skills transfer.
Fantastic. Now our listeners know a bit more about you. So today we are speaking about a very interesting topic, which is cyberbullying. So we all know what bullying is. I think we all know of like an instance where it did happen. Perhaps some of us were actually victims of bullying or even cyberbullying. So I want to start this discussion by asking you, Nicolene, what is cyberbullying?
I think that's such an important question and something that we as attorneys, as legal professionals, are grappling with ourselves, and not just in South Africa. It's a question for many jurisdictions, not only our own. And the simple reason for that is that our Cybercrimes Act, which is fairly newly enacted, doesn't actually describe cyberbullying by way of definition, which means that we have to attribute it to the dictionary definition of coercion, of intimidation, of harassment, all these words that we've associated with, I suppose, school or playground incidents happening to our children, but potentially not happening to us. But to take all of those concepts and to plug it into a digital world or a cyber reality, a virtual world. So one of the major problems we have is that there's no definition here to work with, no legal definition. So we have to draw from previous experience.
So can you give us an example of something that might constitute cyberbullying?
I think we've seen a lot of development in this space, and I think I want to mention something that all of us could relate to. I was really thinking around this quite deeply in preparation for our discussion today. And I think something that we see is maybe sometimes we receive something, whether it be on WhatsApp or it is on email or some other form of social media, a meme, a joke, and maybe that meme or joke is at the expense of someone else. And the minute we cross the line that it is at the expense of someone else, I think that is one of the most key examples of cyberbullying. And particularly when that starts happening to a particular person or a particular class of people on a regular basis, I think that's when we as normal, everyday people may actually come across it. That it's that joke that goes a little bit too far. And of course, it can be even more devious than that. It can be an inappropriate, intimate picture of someone who was taken with or without their consent and is now being distributed. And we've seen movies about this. We've seen TV series about this. but it actually happens. And I think we need to be much more mindful about what we're receiving and what we are forwarding.
Somebody once, like long ago, mentioned something very profound to me. He said that when you want to determine if something is a joke, then you must look at if both people are actually laughing at the joke. If only one party is laughing at the joke, then it's probably starting to be more like bullying. So would you say cyberbullying is something that happens more in like a school environment, or does it also like affect adults?
I think something profound that I heard not too long ago, similarly, is, we are raising children in an environment where they have access to things we may not have had access to when we were the age. And I'm particularly referring to the good old smartphone, right? The smartphone and all the applications that you can download when you have one. And some of those applications are simply not suitable. So and the profound statement I was referring to is really, would we allow our young children to cross the road themselves, yes or no? And if the answer is no, why are we equipping them with a device that we are not giving them the relevant guidance on how to use responsibly? So I think there's some truth in that we have a lot of this happening to our young people, to our young children in the school environment, purely because we have a new device where all of us really need to do a bit of more work on to see that it's being used responsibly. So I think it's prevalent more with our young people because of an adjustment that we as a society and as parents potentially need to make. I don't think it's something that only happens to them, but it's definitely statistically, it's shown to be more prevalent with our young people. But even though it happens to our young people, as parents of those young people, we are often those that need to give the guidance and to deal with what is happening, right? And I think it happens to adults, but it takes different forms. So with children, it may be a joke. That joke that you were referring to where only one person is laughing. It goes that little bit too far. Or something is done at the expense of someone else. The teasing and the bullying you would associate with the playground, right? I think it takes a different form with adults. It's something that morphs into maybe posting a content or a joke or something at the expense of someone else, or tagging someone in a photograph taken a long time ago, which you didn't have permission to tag. And of course, we need to understand when it happens in the adult world, if I could put it that way, it often transgresses more than just the bullying factor. It could breach POPI, where we have data breaches. It could even lead to defamation of character. So many other things flow from it when it happens a little differently, but it all boils down to the coercion, the intimidation, the unpleasantness we would associate to the playground.
Quite interesting. Thank you for sharing that. So what avenues do victims of cyberbullying have?
Well, the new act gives us recourse, any citizen to go and report it at your local police station or SAPS office. And of course, we've got dedicated divisions within the police services to deal with these types of crimes. Now, it's interesting, and I just briefly want to mention this, that before we had the Cyber Crimes Act and some of the later legislation dealing with online behaviors and the do's and the don'ts, we really only looked at the creator of the unsolicited content or the inappropriate content, the profanities, etc. We looked to police the person who created this, but not the person who was distributing this. So the important distinction here is that the entire chain of custody of the said inappropriate joke, meme, or message, whichever form it may take, is now part of what can be reported and policed. So that would be our first point of call. Secondly, if it's done without your permission, right? For example, POPI violation, a photograph you didn't agree to distribute in a particular way, then that could also be something we could do. We could also then report it to the information regulator as a breach. So there are two distinct, free of charge, you don't even need an attorney to go and to make these complaints or reports. And then obviously if you've suffered pecuniary loss, monetary loss, then of course your recourse would be to seek the advice of a suitably qualified attorney in order to guide you through the civil process.
And would a protection order also help in this instance, or not really?
Absolutely. Interestingly, and I think many of our magistrates courts are still grappling with the change that it can actually also cover a cyber harassment incident. And I mean, harassment these days takes different forms. It uses different media or tools, but harassment is still harassment. So absolutely, if you fear that the intimidation and the harassment has any level of threat or damage that is potentially going to ensue from this, then absolutely a protection order would be a very, very good tool and next step to take.
So let's say a child is now the perpetrator of cyberbullying, and they do not have criminal capacity. Like, what would happen there?
Now, that's an interesting case, and I think from an international point of view that all jurisdictions are grappling with, purely because we don't really, if we think about it in a logical sense, the problem stems from the fact that we don't have age restrictions to the use of mobile devices, but essentially anyone can own one that is gifted one or purchases one, regardless of your age. Most applications that are used on these devices do not have age restrictions attached to them, and very little supervision that really happens in this framework. That's why I really mentioned that as my aha moment in many ways. So the problem really stems from the fact that we are using devices. Very young children are accessing these devices, owning them, using them with very little to any restrictions as it relates to the usage of it. And that presents a key problem. All jurisdictions are struggling with that. Some have taken the movement to say, let's place restrictions on downloads on certain accounts and activities. But again, how do you actually police and enforce that? It's a really big issue. So it goes back to the parents. So in some instances, we could, if there's damage from a civil point of view, you could potentially claim against the parents. But again, you will have to prove the causality between the act of the child and the act or omission of the parent, which is not always easy. So these are difficult cases to prove, and that's why I think it's really important to be proactive about it. To say, if there is an incident of bullying, to deal with it swiftly from the start, and to prevent a potential incident of damage ensuing as far as is possible. And where not, to seek professional advice as soon as possible.
Children are getting very clever, let's just be honest, especially with technology. They have all of these ways to get around parental blocks on phones, or that's also a big problem. But like you said, it's also the responsibility of the parents to educate their children on how to use the technology and how to not be a bully. Okay, that's quite interesting. So what I also wanted to ask you is, let's say you are on the other side and your child is the cyberbully. What advice would you give to these parents facing this issue?
Well, I think going back to the problem, if we look at the cause, in my view, the root cause of the problem, particularly with younger people and children, is the unrestricted usage of these devices and applications that allow for this to happen. So I think my advice to any parent, even if your child is maybe just forwarded something they shouldn't have or looked at something they shouldn't have. I think it starts at home. To each of us, we need to educate our children on how to use these devices responsibly. In order to do that, we need to have a clear understanding of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable behavior. Firstly, you can't just post or forward something without someone's express permission to do so. We don't own photographs of other people. So as much as it may sound innocent to take a few pictures and to post them on your Facebook profile, as a parent of your children or whatever the case may be, we need to realize that that is not okay anymore. You need to have permission to share that type of information. You are free to share your own, in your own likeness and own photographs, but when it comes to other people, we need to be courteous. Surely we wouldn't go about taking it upon ourselves to open each other's handbags or briefcases and taking a sneak peek around and showing other people what's in there. In the same way, we need to conduct ourselves with the very basics online. So that's the first point. I think we need to live an example and we need to know right from wrong in that context. Secondly, we need to educate our children on when is it a joke and when is it really a joke on someone else, which could constitute and lead to bullying behavior. And lastly, I think, and this is an important one, there are so many really great applications out there that allow parents to censor and to control what their children do with these devices. Please have a look at them. There are a number of them that are actually even locally developed. So we can even support local South African entrepreneurs from these applications. And simply put, it then restricts the actual use or the downloading of applications. Like, for example, Tinder. We have heard of statistics, scary statistics, where children are actually able to use and view those types of applications, which are obviously not suitable to young children's eyes by any stretch of the imagination. So those are all tools that are definitely should be monitored and coordinated much more carefully. And there are things and ways and tools you as a parent can use. It is a fact your child is going to want one of these devices sooner than just one generation ago. And your child is going to have to use it from a school point of view, to interact with friends. But the key is really for us to teach them in the same way as we would responsibly cross the road, to teach them how to responsibly use these devices. And if something inappropriate has happened, to really sit down, to draw the lines in the sand, and if needs be, to get professional help to help you through the process with your child.
I think that's very good advice. So on a different note, as this podcast is called the Justice in Meals podcast, I wanted to ask you, as a woman in law, have you ever experienced a situation where you were underestimated purely because you are female? Can you tell us a bit more about that, and what would your advice be to someone who's going through a similar situation?
Yeah, I think each of us can share our own war stories. It's a well-documented statistical fact that women still have a lot of challenges to overcome, particularly in the legal profession. Not only in the legal profession, but we still have many challenges to overcome in this profession. The statistics unfortunately show that many women do not stay in our profession for very long. We see many graduates never practicing or exiting practice. And of course, there are a number of studies and reasons for that. But one thing's for sure, without going into many of the reasons, is that the statistics show us that we have a duty to really change things and to overcome and to pave the way to make it easier with each year on year for every new entrant into the profession. We have a duty as all women in the profession. As a woman entering the profession, I think you have a duty to fight not to give up. And what I'll tell you from my own experience is it's difficult. It's not an easy journey. So going out and joining our profession should never be seen as a walk in the park. It's not an easy profession, regardless of your gender. It's very demanding. You will never reach a point where you can sit back and say, oh, I now know everything. You are truly a student for life. And you'll have many experiences, some good, some challenging, some bad. And that's just the nature of the beast that we've decided to embark upon and to try and tame. So the point is really, it's not an easy profession to be part of. As a woman, I think we have many more obstacles, and there will be many. So be brave. You've been brave enough to say, this is the profession I want to be part of. And there will be tough times, but don't give up. Don't be another statistic that joins the profession and that never stays there or never practices. We need more women so that we make it easier for the next woman who joins the profession. And that's a responsibility each one of us has. Let's never, ever forget that.
I absolutely love that. So I then wanted to ask you lastly, where can our listeners get into contact with you?
Well, LinkedIn, you can connect with me personally on my LinkedIn profile, Nicolene Schoeman-Louw. And then, of course, we've got a social presence for the firm, also a LinkedIn profile for the firm. We've got a Facebook and an Instagram profile, and we have our own YouTube channel. And if all of that fails, we also have a website at www.schoomanlaw.co.za, where all our details are accessible. And if any listeners wanted to connect and chat with me, we also offer a free 10-minute consultation. You can just click on any of our names, including mine, on the About Us page, and it would be lovely to connect.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Justice in Heels podcast. If you like this episode, we would love for you to share it with your friends on social media and tag us. As this is a legal podcast, here is a quick disclaimer. The views expressed in this podcast are solely the views of the individuals involved and not those of the firms, brands, or anyone else that we are affiliated with. Till next time, goodbye.